Hello everyone, I am Duke and welcome to one of the most wild theories you have probably heard on the Trench Crusade setting so far. Today we're going to ask and hopefully answer the question, does the Trench Crusade setting exist on a hollow earth? So, why would I think something so wild? Well, grab every tinfoil hat that you can find, take everything with a massive pinch of salt, and if you would like to see some of my sources, some of my information, I've got that in the description below, so please check out some of those to give you a background on what Ultima Thule is and why it might be important. So, as we know, the map came out recently with Jared Blando being the artist, and with any fictional setting, there is a choice for almost every pen stroke in that setting to help build the world. Nothing in that map is a mistake. Nothing in that map is a thing put there through lack of understanding. So in our own world history, Ultima Thule was a very distant landmass that has then come to be associated with things like Iceland, Norway, etc., etc. And what often happened with old world maps was that someone would draw a map, and then the next cartographer to draw a map would end up then creating a map based off that one, and it would include things like random islands and Ultima Thule and all these other things. In fact, some cartographers ended up putting in minor sort of traps, like trap islands. So they'd invent an island or a location somewhere, and that was how they would know that someone had copied their map, because they would know that thing wasn't there. But they'd put it in, and then when that inevitably came up later in someone else's work, well, they knew someone had copied their map. But that's not the case here, because we've only got the one artist for the Trench Crusade map, and that is Jared Blando, and the lore writers behind Trench Crusade will have effectively signed off on most of this stuff in the map. So let's get into what I think Ultima Thule is and why it's important to the setting. So, Ultima Thule in our own world history was discovered in the 4th century, roughly, by a guy called Pythias of Massilia, and it is the farthest landmass at the edges of the known world. Now, after the Fire of Alexandria, we lose a lot of Pythias's original work, but we have surviving references through things like Gemenos of Rhodes's Elements of Astronomy, and also through works of Pliny the Elder and Strabo and other contemporaries of the time, also his critics and people that also support his work. And we find that through all of these, it's quite likely that Theough actually went to an island that he then later named Ultima Thule. We know it's roughly 6 days' sail north of Britain. It has a frozen sea, 22-hour days, a midnight sun, and the sea around the area has these patches of things made of like a mysterious substance. You can't sail through it, you can't walk on it. It's like according to Pythias, it's like a conglomeration of land, air, and sea all in one thing, and it resembles, to him at least, the sea lungs, which are like a kind of jellyfish. It's an old name for a type of jellyfish that was in the Mediterranean at the time. So he goes to this island. He goes to this land of Ultima Thule. And from accounts of early historians and explorers that existed around the time and that came after Pythias, we, broadly speaking, know that Thule existed, but the dispute happens in terms of what Thule is, like which island did he actually discover. Some people think that he discovered Iceland, some people think it was Greenland, some people think it was Norway, or given its location north of England, it could have been somewhere in the Shetland Islands or Faroe Islands. But anyway, it seems to be roughly accepted that he appeared on an island that he then later named Ultima Thule. It shares a lot of similarities with Iceland, and that is the general consensus among a lot of people seems to be that Ultima Thule was Iceland. Anyway, going on from his work, mythology becomes, Ultima Thule becomes an idea in mythology that is this far off land of giants or great warriors, or a society that's sort of utopia-like, and a little bit like the ancient Greek idea of Hyperborea, where, there's these warrior societies of giants that are blessed by the gods. So from mythology and from this mythological idea of a far-off distant land existing outside of space-time and having these monsters or great renowned warriors or this, great society in it, we start to see that influence modern-day literature. And some of the first hints of Ultima Thule coming into literature are through Edgar Allan Poe's works in Dreamland and the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. We see Poe explore these distant lands existing on the edges of space and time, at the edges of the known world, and harbouring terrible dangers and, terrible existential fears. Thule becomes this literary metaphor then for the unknown lands of myth and legend outside of space and time, inhabited by monsters, warriors, and societies blessed by gods, or a doorway to a new world, or at least an unknown world. These ideas become picked up in the Cthulhu mythos by Lovecraft, and, moving on from Poe's work, Lovecraft builds on the idea of using the metaphorical Thules, not as in literal islands or locations, even though Thule and Hyperborea are part of the Cthulhu mythos. He builds on the metaphorical ideas of a Thule and a Hyperborea in his works in the Mountains of Madness to show a distant land that once held an ancient, alien-like society that worshipped terrible elder gods and elder beings. In The White Ship, he uses the themes of an Ultima Thule to explore a fantastical journey for a lighthouse keeper that ends with themes of existential and cosmic dread. And then Jules Verne draws on that work and draws on, these inspirations in mythology to bring us Journey to the Centre of the Earth. And Journey to the Centre of the Earth is set in Iceland now. I was speaking earlier about the connection between Ultima Thule and Iceland, and it's widely accepted that Ultima Thule that Pythias, originally found is probably Iceland. Jules Verne's Journey to the Centre of the Earth, the gateway to the centre of the Earth is in a volcano in Iceland. So, we've got this establishment that Ultima Thule is this far-off distant land, establishing a culture there that may be something of godlike beings or something of a warrior culture. It may be a place to descend further into the earth, a place to go into somewhere outside of space and time. So what does that mean for the Trench Crusade setting? Well, if we look at the Cult of the Lampray's artwork, and we draw inspiration from Lovecraftian work and draw inspiration from this idea that Ultima Thule may be a gateway to somewhere under the earth, I think it could be possible that the Cult of the Lamprey aren't a hell or a heaven-aligned faction at all. They're actually an ancient race far, far, far older than current man in the Garden of Eden. Far older than when God brought man to the earth. He may have created them, they may have been a precursor to humans. But the Cult of the Lamprey then went underground under Thule and, started a society there. This is all completely off the tracks now and into proper theory and speculation. And it's probably not going to be anything connected to the lore. But I think it would be incredibly interesting to see a society, a Hollow Earth theory around the Trench Crusade setting, where this Hollow Earth society, this land that would be beneath Ultima Thule, would be inhabited by the cult of the lamprey, and they don't fight for either side. They're a neutral party in it. Yes, they look monstrous, but so do communicants. It doesn't mean that they are aligned with hell. It doesn't also mean that they're aligned with heaven. I think that we could be getting a body horror Lovecraftian sub-faction or faction with the cult of the lamprey that leans on the idea of a neutrality, but not necessarily someone who will be mercenary-like and side with one side or the other. I think they'll just probably attack everyone. So yeah, the whole theory around Ultima Thule that I have is that it hints at a Hollow Earth for the Trench Crusade setting. But if it hints at a Hollow Earth for the Trench Crusade setting, that could have massive implications on the Church space program. Now, I'm not going to get into that in this video, so if you would like me to make a video on the equally mad, if not more mad, theory that I have on the Trench Crusade space program, let me know in the comments below, because that video will be a bit wilder than this one. If this is true, what I'm thinking, and if the cult of the lamprey inhabit Ultima Thule and Ultima Thule leads to a Hollow Earth, yeah, I think the setting could lean really heavily into mythology without necessarily needing to tie that mythology to a religion, or without having to tie it to anything that would be... we could have mythological creatures come into the Trench Crusade verse, but we wouldn't necessarily have to align them to pagan gods. So it could still have this Abrahamic tradition to the setting, but also bring in mythological creatures. And I know that the game's creators are looking at bringing in mythological creatures, but there has to be a lot of care around how that's handled. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you think I've gone completely insane, let me know. If you think maybe there's something to this, maybe there's a little bit of a kernel of truth in the idea about Ultima Thules, and maybe it is indicative of a Hollow Earth, or maybe it is just not a Hollow Earth, but the home of the cult of the lamprey, or the home of a powerful warrior faction that is off into the frozen norths. Maybe they are thousands and thousands of years old, like the Hyperboreans of ancient Greece, because they exist outside of space and time. Yeah, let me know what you think. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all soon.